All right, so it's the end of week 1 for Data School Cohort 7, and this week their project was to make over one of their applications. They got to pick which one they wanted to do. So kicking us off is Jeremy. And what are you logged on as here? What's your name on here so I can give you control? How'd you sign into the GoToMeeting? What name?
I signed in online.
Don't see you as a name though. KU?
I'm just looking at the people.
Which one is you?
Could be KU.
Let's try.
Yeah, let's try that, see if it works.
Send you a request. Did it just send you a request?
No.
Okay, let's see. So that's oh, you're signed in as Mina. Okay.
Unexpected.
That's
don't know how I did that.
That's different. Okay. So you should be the presenter now.
Okay.
Just share your screen. All right.
Okay, I've sort of got my back to the room, so I'm going to be turning this way and that quite a lot.
The speaker's right here, so.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Okay, so what I want to do today is
My name is?
My name is Jeremy.
Okay.
So the first things first. I want to talk you through, show you my initial biz that I applied with, talk you through vaguely what I'm trying to do, kind of the basic details of what I'm trying to do with it. And then I want to tell you what I think is wrong with it. I think there's quite a lot wrong with it. And then I'm going to show you the corrected version and what I've done to kind of improve it a bit and see what you think, basically.
Sounds good.
So first of all, my original viz, this is targeted at a very specific group of people who there might be very few of. This is targeted at amateur play directors who want to put on a production of a Shakespeare play. And they've got loads of constraints, like they've got, they'll have some kind of performance stage or space where they want to put the play on. And as you might have realized, a particular play works better in a particular stage quite a lot of the time. So if you're putting on like play with lots of murders and deaths, you're probably not going to want to put it on the beach or something, because that just doesn't really work. So this will allow you on the left-hand side to choose between some options, choose what your performance space is like, whether it's outdoors or indoors. It loads quite slowly. And then you'll also be able to choose, it loads very slowly. You'll also be able to choose kind of whether your performance space is sort of dark and intense, so whether it's really open and spacious. So let's say I've got a dark and intense performance space. And you see this, it's filtering on the left-hand side, my little bar chart here, which shows the percentage of your scenes that fit that space, that have that kind of atmosphere. And I particularly want to recreate, let's just leave that on all, but you can sort of have a cave or a forest or whatever. So let's say I've looked at the percentage of scenes that fit my kind of stage, and As You Like It in this instance is top of that. So I can click on As You Like It, and on the right-hand side it will show you a little graph here of by each act and scene, just the play will be divided up into 5 acts and number of scenes, what kind of setting we've got. The idea is that you're going to be designing lots of scene changes, lots of different kinds of scenes. So here, the first one, for example, is outside. It's outside in an orchard. You want something that looks a bit like an orchard. But then you've got the color change that indicates you've then got to quickly change it for the next scene to say a palace, as in this instance. So often the more colors there are, the more colors next to each other, the more complicated the play is actually going to be put on. So that's the general idea. Below we've got on how popular it is, whether critics like it, how many people, what percentage of people in Britain have seen or read it. So that's kind of more information on you to think about whether people are going to want to come and watch it, whether people think it's a good play, is that what I want to do with the play I'm putting on. So I think there's a lot wrong with this. I think the problem I particularly have with this is that the order is quite confusing. I mean, I actually explained there kind of how you went round the visualization. you've got the titles in the top right-hand side, and there's a lot of words. You're kind of going sort of weirdly anti-clockwise around the visualization. I think it's the problem. And also numbers in the bottom right-hand corner, they're quite small. Again, there's lots of words there. They're quite important for helping you decide. And I think the other problem I have with it, two more problems. One is that the left-hand side is a bit too big for what it is. And there's also quite a bit of info missing and that you might be thinking about if you're staging a play. The one that really struck me thinking about it was the number of characters there are that you actually have to cast people for. If there's only about 10 people in the play, it's way easier, there's way less resource required. If there's about 70, then that's another quite big thing you've got to think about. So I've redesigned it a bit. As you can see here, so what I've done here is I've tried to clean up the visualization quite a lot, really draw attention to the left-hand side as well. So you've got the title on the top, and you've still got these options on the left-hand side that you can use to select whether you're indoors or outdoors. Let's say it's a dark and intense performance space, and you want to recreate, let's just go for a castle, let's say. It's also speeded up because I've used extracts this time. So Hamlet comes up top of that. Most scenes that fit your criteria, the highest proportion of scenes. So we click that, and now we've got on the right-hand side, it's a bit more of an infographic, which is kind of more what it should be, because there's quite a small number of things you're trying to communicate, and they should be having more attention drawn to them. So I've got at the top with the name of the play, the kind of things like what the critics think and what the public thinks and how many people, what percentage of people have seen it, because I think they're really important details if you think about what people actually come to this. What I've done with the bar chart, I've changed that scene diagram to a bar chart. I've used shading to indicate which act it is, so it's kind of a little bit easier to read. This is all, pretty much the whole of Hamlet is inside a castle, so there's very few scene changes. I've added the number of lines of each scene to this. The idea being that a number of things, it shows you how long the play is, because it's a fixed size to the axis as well. So you'll know how long the play is, how long it would take to stage. It also shows you, again, you can see the number of scene changes quite clearly. You could also think about, you normally put an interval at the end of Act 3, and you can think about where you might place an interval, how you might stage it in that way as well. So you've got a bit more information to make your decisions on. And I've also added at the bottom the number of parts you need to cast. So it's the number of major characters in the play, which I've defined as having over 100 lines to learn, and the total number of characters in that play. So that's the number of actors you'd have to have doing the play, or you might double up on a few of the parts, particularly the smaller parts and that kind of thing. So I'm just trying to clean it up a lot. I still don't know what to think about my change of font, actually. I think that's one thing I'm not sure about. Tried to make it kind of feel a bit more like the theme, but on the other hand, it is a slightly less clear font to read. So.
That's good. I think really well done. Really, I like the kind of. It's a lot cleaner and makes more sense now than it did before. I remember when you applied, we went through lots of emails back and forth because I just didn't understand what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
I think my only feedback for here is I like what you did with the timeline here instead. It's much better. When you want to have big number callouts like that, make them really big, because make them like 24, 36 point font, like the 2, the 1, and the 31%, because those are the numbers you want to draw attention. So that'd be the only feedback, is make those big numbers big. But other than that, really good changes. Yeah. Any other feedback?
I was just going to say, with the third filter, potentially worth changing it to single select or something, because generally you would only be, I would guess, but it depends.
It's a good question. I'm not sure whether you select one or multiple. It's a design feature that I wasn't quite sure which one was probably best, because you might sort of want a castle, and you might want sort of political play with castles, so you might want multiple.
Okay.
But I think you might be right. I'm not quite sure, to be honest.
Well, you use the word particularly,
Yeah.
which makes it seem like it should be precise, like it should be just one. So.
Yeah, that makes sense, actually.
Yeah.
Changing the list. Yeah.
Cool. Good. I like the font choice, actually, because it feels more like a playbill. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what I'm going for.
Cool. Good. Well
Okay.
done.
Thanks.
All right. You can just stop sharing. Who's number 2? David?
Journey, can I go over your keyboard?
Oh yeah, sure.
No, Nalidi said she showed her friend came over to do an MA in Shakespeare, and she showed her your original version, and she was very excited. So she should be much more excited. I want to know why DS1 is in Yosemite on holiday and they're dialing into this. They need get a life, guys.
Well, hello everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm going to go through the.
My name is.
My name is David Sanchez. It's been a very nice first week at the
Do you have
DS7.
carpal tunnel already? Is that the problem?
From 1 week, this was a discussion between a car and myself, and the car kind of won.
Oh,
okay. This is the first Tableau story presentation that I prepared, and I sent it to Andy. When I was preparing this, I had 3 objectives in mind. I have just moved to London from the US and was in an Airbnb. We were in an Airbnb, so we were trying to find a place to live. So that was the first aim that we had, to find a place to live. The second was I wanted to brush up my Python, and I wanted to play with Google Maps API and with Tableau. And then the third one was trying to get an invite to the DS7. So in those terms, I think it was a success. But I'm going to walk you through it and see what things can change and who we are speaking to. So the first part, so this is a story with 3 pages, and the first one is going to be a long one that says, who am I? I use it also as an introduction, why am I coming to the US? And then the main question that I had, where to live in London? And at that point, we had one requirement. We wanted a place that was close to a grocery store. I chose Sainsbury because we were in Whitechapel, and that was the only one that was there by the metro. I didn't know any better, so I started with Sainsbury. And then we wanted to be in a convenient place to go to rock climbing. My partner works at UCL, so something that was convenient for her. And then to somewhere that was convenient to bike to work here. So I wanted to use it, as I say, as an introduction, as also to try to, I have 0 Tableau skills before this. My design skills are also closer to 0, so the only thing I had left was, okay, where's my thought process? So I want to make sure that I make my thought process clear to whoever is seeing this. And I started saying, okay, I'm going to have a cloud of points, random points in London, and then I'm going to assign those points to a zip code, and then I'm going to use those points in Google Maps to calculate the distances by train, tube, or by bike, and group them in Tableau by zip code. So here is within the M25. Those were the only ones that we were considering, and you can choose whatever of the categories. So how long will it take to go to the grocery store, or how long will it take to go to rock climbing, or to the partners, or my. I really like maps. I think this, when I saw Tableau the first time with maps, that was like, oh, this is nice. So I wanted to base the visualization on maps. And then I built a score based on, okay, what's more important, that I make it by bike to work, or that my partner's commute time is shorter than mine. And so whatever I evaluated as more important.
When you decide,
it's obvious. Her commuting time is more important.
Good answer.
That has been the case for several years. And so this basically reflects that, which zip codes are the one we like the most. And then all across the visualization, there's some text on the right that is difficult to read unless you're on the screen, but it will tell you all the story and all the details. And finally, here here in this graph, it's not only important for us that the average time to commute or grocery or whatever is short, but we wouldn't, if we have the choice, it would be better if all the average is kind of similar. Instead of one lives close to the job and the other has to travel for 1 hour, maybe it's better if both of us have to travel for 25, 30 minutes. So that's what the dispersion that is showing in the y-axis is showing. And so those blue dots there are the neighborhoods that we ideally would like to live. And then based on that information, I went with that and went to Zoopla, started to look for ads, discovered those that were too expensive, and start visiting, and then in the end we found one apartment that met those requirements.
Just one.
Well, there were several more.
Oh, okay.
We visited a lot, but in the end, the one we found is this one. And here you see the different lines are the paths that we need to follow. Blue, orange, and gray are going to the grocery, my partner's job, or going to rock climbing, that we are going to do it by public transport, and the red is by bike to come here. And all that was really, really relevant. We did follow that, but what really bothered us was that it has this nice patio on the outside. And that's something that you cannot, I couldn't, or I didn't put that in the requirements, right? But that was what sold us into the apartment. And finally, the last step was other info for the visualizations that shows the different Sainsbury's that were accounted for in gray, in orange, the climbing locations. Red is the data school, and blue is my UCL. Okay, so as I said, I think it was successful in the way that I made it here, but things that I would change. I spent a lot of time thinking, what would I change? Because when I was preparing the presentation, the makeover is, who am I going to tell this to? So who is interested in where I live and where do I live? And the only answer is my father and my mother. So I think that they are the only people that would really care where I live. And they have been asking me, what is this Tableau thing? What are you doing? So with that idea in mind, I took that previous construct and tried to apply some of the concept that we have been going through this week. Mostly try to declutter and add some elements that will grab attention. I really like this. I think what Caroline was saying yesterday, sometimes you are very invested in something and you keep it. So I like this image because I prepared it first. So I keep it and highlight where to live in London, and the only criteria we have is that it has to be conveniently located for grocery rock climbing.
So you got rid of all the text, basically.
Yes. So I think it's
easier.
Yeah. That part is easy to understand, and I don't think there are any methods needed here. So I just go. I like the maps, as I say, so I keep them up, and you can select for the different destinations and see how the grocery, all the districts in London are well served for grocery. Not so much for rock climbing, and my job basically coming here by bike basically reflects the distance from the other side. I maintain the score that summarizes it like that, and then I change that scatter. I keep the scatter plot, but I added those colors and elements that will highlight what I want the attention to go. So there are several zip codes where I wouldn't mind to live, but I just need a jackpot in the lottery before I can afford that, right? So those are, I select unaffordable, and I highlight the 3 only that within all the requirements were something that we could afford. And if you click on here, they will show up where they are, just to give my father an idea of where those locations are. And again, I finished with the same map. And with the real reason that we picked that apartment. And with an invitation to have a barbecue there.
Yes.
Whenever it's convenient.
Well done, really good. I think it's much better as one long story than the multiple story points. You know, it's much more cohesive. So yeah, really good. Basically, you just decluttered everything.
Yes. Yeah. That here it's kind of comparing what the two look like before and after.
Yeah.
It's the same idea, the same elements that I thought they work or that I particularly like.
Right.
And trying to remove all the other.
The only thing that might do different is, so if you go back to your application, so if you go back to the top, you've got a nice little white divider that kind of splits the section up. I would probably have that consistent between all the sections, because really it's a series of it's almost like story points, but vertically. So it might be good to have that white divider in there between each of the sections as well. Yeah, but that's it. It's good. Really good. Well done. This is number 3.
Do I need to return your control?
No, I'll take it. Okay, next up is Charlie.
Which one do you am I going for?
Did you install the app?
I think this is the map, yes.
Let's try to go in from web.
So really good. Okay.
What's the website you guys need to go to for the? Is it just GoToMeeting?
Just
Good.
GoToMeeting. Just do join meeting. 343
329
329.
053.
This is just the quickest way to do it. And then I can give you control again in a second. No, it's okay. So you want to call using the phone. Say, okay, all set.
We've got
Now I can switch it back over to
it's not visualized.
giving you. Yeah, just set that. It's okay. Only 2 seconds.
Some years I went, I used to
Add
get
extension.
Yeah.
And then share. Yep. Make sure you guys close Convo before you present as well. Jeremy.
Are we
Yep, you're up.
good? Cool. Okay, so hi, I'm Charlie. I decided that for my makeover I would do the visualization that I had for my interview rather than the first one. For a little bit of context, the first one that I did was a series of stories. It was quite busy, a lot of information. So when it came to doing this one for the interview, I wanted to try and keep it really a bit more streamlined, a bit more clear, and all just on one dashboard. So what I decided to look at with the police encounters data was how the number of police encounters vary between defensive, offensive, and specialist players. So the chart at the top is just the kind of broad overview, and then that also is used as a highlight action across the rest of the dashboard. So it's kind of a legend and a chart. And then down the left-hand side, it moves into the positions themselves rather than just the offense, defense, specialist. A problem here, I think this graph is basically meaningless. It doesn't offer you any insight really, because the number of players in each position varies so much. You'll normally have 1 or 2 specialist players compared to dozens of offensive players, right? So this chart doesn't really need to be here at all. I just left it there because I enjoy the fact that the way you present data is important to how you understand it, but it's not helpful. What I tried to do in the graph underneath was normalize the values for the the number of players on a team, which I just
So the one you're talking about getting rid of is the first of these two.
yeah. So
Okay.
this is the one that
Right. So you're keeping the normalized version you like. It's the non-normalized that you don't.
the normalized one I definitely prefer.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So then this one is normalized. So basically the bit down the middle is where you would expect people to be if the number of encounters match the number
Okay.
of players in that
Right.
position, right?
So who's behaving badly, basically?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So people with bars to the right hand side of the origin are worse than you'd expect. And then over on the right hand side, it's just what causes the police encounters and whether that varies between the different types of position. And you show it shows some small amount of variation. But I think overall there's not much of a story in the data. There aren't many differences that you're pulling out, and it's hard to assign any meaning to it. You know? So the fact that there are 3 arrested punters, that's 2 guys. One guy's been arrested twice. You know, it's kind of hard to tell a story with the data, I think. And the other problem I have with it is that I think it's kind of flat. So we were being told yesterday about about the importance of highlighting what you want people's eyes to be drawn to, basically, and giving some texture to the way you present data. So with those 2 things in mind, I changed the analysis that I did fairly significantly to try and do some analysis that was slightly more insightful. I remember Andy during the interview asking me, did you look at the data in terms of when the arrest happened during the season? Because there's some interesting things to pull out there. And the other time I hadn't, and I thought this would be a good opportunity to go back to that and try and pull out those insights. So the kind of broad question is, how did NFL player arrests vary between 2000 and 2016? And to do this, I've created this kind of marginal histogram. So in the main bit, you can see how many arrests happened in each month and year, each month of each year. And then along the top, it's just an aggregate. So it's a sum of all of the arrests in that month across the 16-year period. And it's got some kind of annotations at the top to tell you pre-season, regular season, post-season, and off-season. And this quite clearly highlights that there are more arrests happening during the off-season rather than in-season, but also has this kind of interesting little dip in the month of April. And in the comment here it says, the NFL draft normally happens at the end of April or the start of May, which is a potential explanatory factor for that. And
So
then
you don't get arrested before the draft, basically.
Yeah, not great for your job prospects.
Yeah.
And then down the right hand side is the total number of arrests per year. And the kind of colour for this is the fact that in 2007 the NFL introduced a new player conduct policy with the kind of the idea of being able to penalise players who were misbehaving in their personal life with on-pitch time. So basically game suspensions for people who had police encounters. And you can see that beyond this point, there's been a kind of steady decline in the number of arrests per year, down to an all-time, since 2000 minimum of 23 arrests in 2016. I think generally the design's quite good, kind of nice and clean, you can see what's going on.
You wouldn't even know this is the same data set based on how different you made it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But this is much more insightful, I think. And the design itself is really, really good. And then sticking the text on the upper right where you had space for your title and stuff.
Yep.
You can stick something up there, right? So really good. It's a good example of a marginal histogram as well. So, and then I really like how you put the text on there for context. That's so the only thing I might do different is, Charlie, up at the top, is those numbers are turned sideways, so I rotate those probably.
Yeah.
They
were rotated at some point, and now I've rotated them back.
It's okay.
Sorry.
And I like what you did for the off season and regular season bracket things there. That's really nice. Yeah. This is really good. I like it.
Cool. Shout out to Marcus from DS6 who wrote the blog. He wrote a blog about marginal histograms.
Yeah, that he stole from me. But.
Well, that's the one that I got.
All right, good job. Well done. Who's next? It's going to ask you to load an add-in, so just hit download and then add. Yep.
So I did my initial application as well. Hi, I'm Steph. So I did it on dates that people get married on in the UK. So this year I've been to 9 weddings. So that's kind of why I picked a
It's a bit
wedding.
ridiculous.
Yeah, wedding data set. So I was kind of going with like when should you expect your diary to be more busy with weddings and all that kind of stuff. So I started with a few questions. So I've got a few points to pick about this. So I changed it to like curly writing for wedding theme and that kind of thing. And it's just too busy, I think.
It's a little hard to read.
Yeah.
Just like the invitations are hard to read.
Yeah. And there's a lot of text. So this top one is an overall view to get a general idea. But all of that information I've repeated in charts underneath it anyway. So that's kind of redundant. So then I did a trend across the months, picked out an interesting month. So summer's more popular. February, the 14th of February is really popular, and when it happens, the 29th is as well. And then
So you don't have to celebrate your anniversary as often.
yeah, exactly. It's an easy date to remember.
Not married as long.
And then Friday the 13th, there's a dip. Found that interesting. And then I did a trend across the week, so Saturdays are more popular. And then I've got another trend over the year, so it's dipped over the time period that I've got. And then I split it out by days of the week there as well to pull out that Saturday is the biggest one. And then you can't see the other days under there because of that bar. But yeah, so this it's long. One of the bits of feedback was there was like you get to the bottom and there's no summary of what the point was. Yeah, so it's just a lot. So I did this instead. So I changed it to 4 charts to keep it a lot simpler. And took out a lot of the text and the chattiness and changed it to easier to read text. So there's less of a theme. I kept the kind of colours, but yeah. So August is the most popular month. I took off axes and haven't put numbers on, and mainly to keep it clean, but also the point I'm trying to make is more the difference between them rather than what the actual numbers are. Yeah, so summer's more popular, and Saturday is the most popular day of the week, the chart on the top right. And it's also the day that's decreased in popularity. So also in this one, I just took the most recent 10 years in the data set, so it's a nice 10-year round number rather than, I think it was 95 in the first one.
So where the dots are overlaid, they're basically the same.
Yeah,
It's
so it
very
hasn't
slight
changed
change.
much.
Okay. So for Saturday's changed a lot.
Yeah, exactly. So it's decreased over that 10-year period, but that's mainly driven by the Saturday decreasing. And then for each, the month distribution and the day of the week distribution, I pulled out an interesting one of each, which is the same ones as in the one before. So the interesting month is February. So yeah, Valentine's Day is double the overall daily average, and February is fairly low anyway, but yeah, it kind of trumps every other day of the week in there. Yeah, 3 times the daily average in February. And then the most interesting day of the week is Friday the 13th is very unpopular, basically. Yeah, so I just cleaned it up.
That's good. Yeah, I'm not sure about the thing on the upper right.
Yeah, so
Because I don't know
we
which
spent
year
a
is
long
which.
time.
Yeah. You tried a
Um,
slope graph as well, and
yeah.
because they were just flat lines for everything else.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
So Saturday was really high, and
Yeah.
kind of you got the point that Saturday was biggest and decreased, but it kind of you then couldn't see what was going on in all the others.
Yeah.
So yeah, I struggled with that one. That was the best out of the
Okay.
ones that I tried. But yeah.
Do you try just like a bar chart that just goes either up or down, whether it's increasing or decreasing?
Yes.
With everything else basically at zero because the ones.
Yeah, they were all tiny. I didn't like that one
Okay.
either.
Okay.
Yeah, I
So you
played
just
around
made a
with it.
choice that you thought that was the best way. Yeah. So at least
Yeah.
coloring the dots, you know it's a decrease. It just doesn't look like much. Yeah.
So I tried like
Okay.
arrow, like a different shape on the
Right. Yeah, I
most
remember
recent
seeing
view
that.
and
Yeah.
that kind of thing. I played around with it a lot, so it's still not quite right, but it's
Yeah.
the best out of.
That's good. Cool. I like the reference lines for context as well.
Yeah.
So that helps.
Yeah, I put the same overall day average on
Yeah.
both
On
as
both
well.
of them, yeah. Cool, good. Well done. Good job.
Before.
Oh yes.
Oh, Anna wants to know how you're doing the mustachios that align with the month and day.
Oh, they're pictures, they're images,
Okay, images.
and it took. It's probably one of the longest things it took me to do in the redo. Actually, I had to like change the little where the line was, and save it as an image, and then put it in. Yeah. It's painful. Yeah.
Am I up?
You are.
Hello, my name's Joe, and I'm going to do the data set I needed to do for my interview, which was the bicycle thefts in the UK. So initially, I had all this data, and I thought, excellent, I'm going to try and do as much as I can. And then I even added some more data into it, and I presented it as a story. You'll also notice a bit of a theme running through this. I think the week before I got this data set, or 2 weeks before, I watched Andy's webinar on predictive analytics, and I thought, I'll get me some brownie points if I stick some predictive analytics in there. So, yeah, so this was a kind of overview, looking at all the different ones. We can see from the area chart on the top right that there's quite a high number of unresolved cases of bicycle theft, 88% in fact. And then we look at the monthly change as well in the bottom right, and it shows that there's quite a bit of seasonality to it. So moving on to our, this was the first data set I added in. There's another one. This was from the Department of Transport, and this is looking at the proportion of the population who own a bike, who cycle, whether it be for leisure or work. And I have used cluster analysis to pick out the high-risk areas in the UK. And then, as we can see, there's not really much of a trend here. It certainly isn't a strong correlation that can tell any story. And then, for these high-risk areas, we're looking at the percentage of the population who cycle. So the next data set that I added in was from the census in 2011, and this is looking at those who cycle to work, which we can see there's a much stronger correlation. And again, I've used cluster analysis for the high-risk areas, and there's a very strong correlation between those who cycle to work and those who get their bike stolen.
Imagine that.
And the way
who would have ever thought that?
So what I didn't look at here was the location of where the bikes were stolen, if they were like in work, which I'd seen some other examples of. I wasn't sure how they did that. But I kind of said from this, well, let's assume that if you cycle to work, you're more likely to get your bike stolen. And then these are the kind of areas where people who cycle to work get their bike stolen from. Whether that be where they live or where the bike is stolen from, I'm not 100% sure. So that was kind of my kind of story, and then for some reason I stuck on the end this local authority and police force exploration tool, which is actually is my favourite bit of the whole visualisation, because it's the bit that you could use that I seen anyway going to the most use. So each dot here represents a local authority, and each dot here represents a police force. And what you can do is you can click on a local authority. So if we look at Brighton and Hove, the map then zooms in, and we get a heat map showing where the most thefts are happening. And most of the time you can kind of assume that it's going to be around the town centre. Maybe that's because that's where people work. Who knows? And then you also see this bar chart in the middle, which shows the blue bar is the total number of thefts within the police force, and the orange dot is what percentage are left unresolved. So, and you can do the same filtering with the police force down the bottom here as well. So for me, that was the most important part of the tool, and that's what I've decided to reviz. Now that's a different viz, I thought, the hell with the colour scheme, I'm changing it. So I went for a kind of black and white theme, because I thought, you know, police, black and white kind of checkers and stuff is where I started, and then it kind of grew from there. But I have left that, it was an area chart, changed to a line graph, as Andy suggested in this week's lessons, and I've kind of kept that in there for context. Arguably, you don't need it, but it kind of says if you're not aware of the situation, this is how we're getting on with trying to solve bike thefts in the UK, and we can see that there's a huge problem. I've also taken the forecast off it as well, because it's more about this is what's happening, what can we do about it? So I've redesigned this. I've put the map in the middle because I think it's probably one of the more important parts, and it's certainly the best bit of it. I like it the best anyway. And I've included the local authorities down the bottom, and I've got the police force on the right. And the police force on the right, instead of having all of them, I've got the top 20, and again the same for the local authorities. And again, you can still click here on the local authority, and then that will filter to show that local authority and also any police force that's had any goings on there. Or you can filter from the charts below. It works the same on the police force. So if we look at Sussex, for example, and we can see that there. But obviously, if your local authority does not lie in the top 20, and you still want to see it, then you can look at it from the top. So I'm living in Newham just now. Work. No.
Don't select the rest of them first, right?
Oh, really?
Yeah. Do all and then none.
Yeah. There we go. So that's you can look from there as well. Unfortunately, it only brings up one here. I probably need to change that so that it doesn't change. Maybe a highlight.
What do the dot and the square mean on the?
So
bar?
this is the square is effectively a bar chart.
Right. What's
So
the dot?
the bar is the total number of thefts, and then the white dot is the number that are unresolved, or the percentage unresolved.
Oh, okay.
And that's kind of from up here.
Gotcha.
And that is pretty much it. So when I was revisiting this, I thought one of the things that we were talking about with Caroline earlier in the week was editing and taking out a lot of stuff. I was telling too many stories to too many different people in my first original one. I thought, let's just focus for one or two or three audiences. In this case, it is police forces. They might want to say, Metropolitan Police, they have quite a low response rate, low unresolved rate, sorry, as do Avon and Somerset. So maybe we'll get in touch with them, see what they're doing. Might be local authorities saying, well, we've got a really big problem with bicycle theft. Let's find some other local authorities, see what they're doing. Or it might just be someone who's thinking about buying a bike. I think, do I live somewhere where I'm going to get my bike stolen, or am I going to be all right to get a bike and not get it stolen?
Okay. Well done. I think so. The squares and the circles are bothering me that you're using both of them. I don't know why, but it does. I would have probably done maybe overlaid. Instead of using the percentage on the white dots and circles on the bar charts, I probably would have just done another white bar on top of the black bar,
So like a bar and bar?
Yeah, almost like a bar and bar. Because then you would know of Cambridge, that would still give you the percentage, right? Because you can see it going up to, you probably need to make it a little bit thinner than the black one so you can see it, but that would help show how many are unresolved. And then did you try using like either a light gray that's almost like a white on the map to be consistent with your colors everywhere else? Instead of
So
the
reason the background is that colour is because...
Not the background, the red that you used, the pink or whatever
Oh,
that is.
I just thought I'd use a red so that so that when you zoom down into an area...
Right. I was just wondering if a white might work better because or a gray that kind of should, because then it might go better with the theme, but it might not show up on the map either. So, okay, that's good. It's definitely better. Yeah.
Yeah, I changed the circles and the squares because I thought it was two separate things.
Yeah.
So one's a local authority, one's
Yeah, but they're
a police force.
separated by the map, so you treat them as separate things anyway.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool. Good job. Well done. I guess one more thing.
Yeah.
So in the line chart at the top, you've got the white for number unresolved. In the scatter plots, it represents number unresolved. But then you switch to percentage in the bottom, and that's what's confusing.
Right, okay.
So I would be consistent with the metric that you use. That's what I mean by that. Yeah. Okay, cool. Good. Who's next?
I'm up. How do I stop sharing?
I'll just take it from you.
We do.
So it should ask you to download something and then just hit add extension.
Cool. 2 seconds. That extension, yeah.
Yep.
Share. It's all right. Yeah, cool. Hi, I'm Michael. As you all know, people listening may not. This is my application that I did for Andy on arrests of NFL players. When it was sent to me, really, I had the main aim that I was trying to get was to create a story. So I started by searching through all the data, looking at a lot of different fields, putting them together in lots of different charts to see if I can find any trends in any of the data. I wanted to try and find something really sort of intricate and insightful. I don't know why, that's just how I started when I sort of got hold of the data, and that was my sort of main aim at the outset. But having looked through a lot of it, I couldn't really find a lot that correlated with the other data in the data set that really sort of jumped out at me. And then when I actually looked back at the probably most basic level of actually how many arrests there were by a year, I noticed these changes. So in 2007, 2008 sort of time, there was a peak, and then it dropped, but it sort of steadied out for the following few years. And then in 2014, it began to drop again. So I basically went online and tried to find out reasons for that. So it turns out that in 2007, there was a conduct policy change, as we've heard already. So I've included in here a URL link to that. If you select that, you can get to the link for the article about it. But after reading it and seeing that they did make changes, but knowing that in 2014 it dropped again, I was curious as to why it didn't actually drop that much. So I continued researching and found that in 2014, there was another conduct change, which was a lot more strict, and it seems to have done the trick. So, yeah, I mean, my issue with this first section is there's quite a lot of text, and it's quite sort of bulky with reading it if you really wanted to get into that much detail. So that's my first sort of concern with my initial application. My next part of the story, because obviously I had to make it into some sort of story, and looking at it, because there's only a few data points beyond 2014, and knowing that the data was only up to about halfway through the year in 2017, I wanted to know whether or not 2017 would catch up. So I looked at the number of arrests in an off season, and it turns out that 72% of all of the arrests were made for crimes in the off season, of which half were actually substance-related crimes. So a lot less serious crimes. It just suggests that people were not too fussed really about the conduct policy that was in place. If they do it, there wasn't really much many repercussions, I guess. So once I did that, I really I was looking at it and thought for some reason that it was a bit short. So I similarly to Joe, just built something that I could chuck on the end to lengthen it a bit, and came up with this, which is basically for fans essentially to select their team, and it just gives an overview of how many arrests there were, the individuals that committed those arrests, what they did. It basically chucked all the other information in at the end just so that it was available, and I felt like it needed to be there. And my issue with that is, one, it wasn't very intuitive, it was quite bulky and unnecessary, and obviously tables aren't brilliant, but there it is.
They love it in the bank, though.
They love it in the bank. They love it at First Central, as you know. My key issues were that I didn't really focus on any particular audience other than the fact that this is like an interview application and I just need stuff in there. And the fact that this wasn't really there it wasn't really there for any reason. It was quite bulky. So with the rework, other than that, I was relatively happy with formatting as a whole, and a lot of the rest of the stuff in there. So what I've really done and what I've really taken on board from the last week or so is actually having a story, having an audience that you're actually aiming for your application to be for, and not needing to chuck all the information in there because nobody necessarily needs to see everything. So I started with just putting in a few key points for context about the fact that there are arrests, and although they're decreasing, it's still quite a high number. And use text boxes and enclosure to highlight those points. And then I just reworked the bit that I chucked on the end to make it less bulky. So allowing people to select their team. I don't have a team, so I'll just select one at random. And it just highlights a few key points. So it ranks here just as a small indicator of where they fit in amongst the other teams.
Oh,
yeah, so
that's a good idea.
If you select Green Bay Packers,
I like that.
it highlights just roughly on there where they are, but
Sure.
without too much information to bulk it out. I've included a spark line which just shows the arrests over the years, so you can get an idea of whether they're contributing to.
Did you pick the Vikings?
Yeah. So the Vikings actually ranked first. They commit the most, and as you can see, they're not actually, based on the spark line, they're not really dropping along with the rest of the league. So I guess that could be a viz for another day. But what it does highlight as well is that the number of arrests is 44, but the number of individuals that were arrested is only 30, which is basically saying that there's a few individuals in there that are committing more than one crime, and whether that's because they're a bad person, I guess, or whether it's because they don't care about the conduct or the conduct policy or what it is, you don't know. But generally, you can see that they have a lot more. Well, they have more people committing multiple crimes than others. Whereas if you select another one, I can't think off the top of my head. Texans, they have six arrests, and they're all individual people, which is why we're last. So and then I've just put in there a little donut so you can see whether it was in an off season. Again, because it's aimed at fans, just to see whether their players, I guess, are doing it in season where it's actually more important. I suppose it's important everywhere, but it was just really so that you could see that. And a quick breakdown as well of what sort of crimes that are being committed by each team. That is that.
Cool, I like it. It's not that much different. You just cleaned it up quite a bit.
Yeah,
simplified it. I really like your most arrests to least arrests little dot thing there. The ranking. Why'd you choose not to sort the crimes on the bar chart? the bottom right?
No reason. I guess I just didn't notice.
Okay.
I didn't have a reason not to do it. I just.
Okay, that might be my only feedback. Is probably to sort those. But yeah, other than that, it's really good. I like it.
Well, aren't they sorted alphabetically?
Well, they are, but wouldn't you want to know like what's the top crime or the second most?
But then wouldn't it create a lot of confusion if every time you selected another team, it would just kind of
Because it's just for that one team anyway, right? So
Yeah, but I
everything
think.
else changes when you switch the
Yeah.
team, right?
Yeah.
So
And not every team has every crime.
right,
It's changing.
cool, good, well done,
Cool.
good job.
You'll pick me up, yeah.
So did you work at First Central?
I did, yeah.
What's that?
I was keen to go in there this week.
So I'm lucky.
Yeah, you sat. I think Nico. I can't remember which way Nico was facing. I was sort of in front, in the middle.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I was just sort of sat there in front of you for most of the week. Most of the time.
Hi, my name is Georgia. So I have decided to pick my very first dashboard that I did. Does money bring happiness? Is the question. I did something very, very simple. Just click on a country and it says like the ranking and like the happiness score and the GDP per capita, and then you can click another country and you can see. And I have highlighted some countries that I thought they were a bit more interesting, but there were a lot of things that I didn't like when I look back at it. Well, the ranking, for example, that you can scroll down, and then it pretty much says like the number here, but of course if it's first, then you don't really need a number, I guess. And the scatter plot, it's not squared. Maybe the color on the map, well, a lot of things. So I've decided to doing it again. And I included another thing in the dashboard, which is region, that you can pick from here, and or either you can pick a country. Then I decided to eliminate like all the countries, but just doing a top 20. And here is the happiness, is the GDP per capita. So you can see straight away that, for example, Norway, like Costa Rica has a lower GDP per capita, while Luxembourg is higher, but still it's higher in the ranking.
And how are those sorted? By the happiness rank?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, just top 20.
Okay.
You can pick a region, and it highlights just the region here in the scatter plot. And then I did some conclusions in the end. There are some countries where some region where the relationship is stronger, like Europe. You can see from the top 20 rank as well. There are like 14 countries out of 20 are European. While there are some countries like Latin America where the GDP is not as high, but they're still happy.
So they're happier relative to their GDP.
Yeah. And while some country like the Middle East, it's pretty much below the average, or the Eastern Asia as well. And
Interesting.
Norway is the happiest country, but it's still not the richest. While Qatar is the a richer country, but it's not the happiest. And that's it.
Yeah, it's good. Can you stick it back in presentation mode there? So one thing is I would flip your region and country filters, put region first, because region is higher in the hierarchy than country. When you filter to a region, I would probably have the map zoom into that region then, to make it a bit easier to see. So for example, when you click on, just pick Europe, for example. Western Europe, see the map doesn't zoom, so hit your little pin on your map on the left. See your area, so just hit your pin, and that'll reset it then.
Oh, okay.
So now if you go back to all, it'll just fit into whatever that size is, right? So, but it's weird that it's wrapping. Like, see now I don't know why it's not fitting. It must be this. Oh, it's because you have it floating. You've got the top 20 thing floating over top of the map. That's why. Is the top 20 floating over top of the map? It does have a border, but it looks like it goes behind. Well, anyway, that's okay. We can worry about that later. At first, I was thinking it was too much color, but actually, I think it's okay. I don't know. What do you guys think about the color? Because the highlighting works.
Can maybe reduce the regions?
Yeah, I think
maybe
it needs the color to
maybe just have the
separate them,
Americas
but,
or something. So you could combine North America and
Africa.
Latin America and Caribbean into one. Maybe throw Australia and New Zealand in with the East Asia.
So that's
And even Southeast Asia, those probably.
yeah, but the point is like it's the same point I'm making is that like if you look at all the orange dots, right, Latin America, they all have kind of a similar relationship. They're all above the curve, and I think that if you start adding the USA, you're gonna have.
Where's North America? If you click that,
it's.
They're above as well.
Yeah, but there's some patterning of like regionality that you lose when you start moving too geographically, too wide geographically.
It's definitely a lot cleaner than your original.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
That would be cool. It's Nico got me onto all this like highlighting other things. So if you had highlight action that when you hover on the map, based on just the region field, so then it highlighted the regions in the chart on the right and the chart below when you can see them at the same time. That'd be quite cool.
Yeah. Said put a highlight. We can show you that another time.
No, I thought I did it. I don't know why.
It'd be kind of working like a filter does.
Yeah. I thought.
But it's not filtering that. Yeah.
I don't know why, but here I'm.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah.
No,
but instead of the other ones going away, you would just highlight them instead.
No, but I put that. I was just highlighting. I don't know why.
Yeah, I don't see why you need to filter. You need to filter. You're just hovering and just saying stuff. I would go for that.
But I don't know why it was. I did highlight it actually. It was not filtered.
That's okay. Yeah.
I don't know why it's not because I. Okay.
Don't worry about it. Yeah. All right. Any other feedback?
It sort of ties in with what Dan said, just to potentially have them all. There's a lot on there to do it, but potentially try and have them on the same screen. Just because obviously you filter at the top and then you have to scroll down to see it. I don't know. I find when I'm filtering stuff, if it's in the same view, you don't have to go down and then go back up to change the filter and things like that. But,
okay. Yeah.
It's just personal preference, I guess.
Because you could ask, like, what does the map actually tell you? What to add? It just shows you where the countries are. So they could be icons for the regions instead, and then you can pull the scatter chart up to the top.
So you could have a series of icons that represent each region, and then you click on those, and your scatter plot could just be up at the top instead. Yeah. Well, we could use that as an exercise one time to show how to do that. Yeah. We'll do that. Okay. Well done. Good job.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
Sorry, I wrote it in the chat. I wasn't sure whether you were going to read it. It's Eva here. My suggestion was, instead of the scatter plot, you could use a quadrant to have like very happy but poor, very happy and rich, like to kind of split them up that way.
Yeah. Like take your scatter plot and put it in fours instead.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. And you could just annotate each corner or something. Cool. All right. Who's next? Who's next? Me. Oh, yeah. I'll just take it from you.
Who's left?
And
Is this the last one? Okay.
Okay, hi everyone, I'm Elliot, and I guess I was also going to go through trying to rehashing my second application, like the second part of the application. So what I wanted to do originally was just really try to kind of be able to break down and look at the different patterns that you can find across just time for bicycle thefts in the UK, and as well across just different police forces. So I was quite proud of the fact that I had managed to kind of get the percentage different from previous month, looking quite neat and really kind of giving this kind of pattern of just, I guess, change over time from a per month basis. I think it conveyed quite nicely, I guess, the decrease and the increase of bicycle theft across the time frame that we had set up originally. But I guess I'll go over some of the issues at the same time, where I guess Andy told me that I guess it could be a bit misleading because the colors blend in together, so you don't, these are individual months, and so you can really kind of blend in the colors into a time frame. And another, I guess, criticism that this graph is just the same representation of the above graph, but just maybe just a bit more graphic and visual, but it doesn't.
What does each line mean? Is it
every year. Oh, okay. So every year is.
So you don't know which line goes with which year then?
Well, I mean, I had added some highlighting action, so
but if you were to look at it as a static
graph, you definitely wouldn't see it. But yeah, so and I don't think it added much context and I guess interpretation of what's actually going on. So that wasn't like the best, but I was quite happy about that one. And this one, I guess, was a bit messy, but what I tried to show was relative to the number of thefts, which you can see displayed on the tree map, which Andy doesn't like really, and the percentage different from average, just to get a feel for, I guess, the smaller police forces, how little crime they get relative to the bigger ones, but it didn't really add much, and it was a bit the same thing as the one on the side. But what was actually interesting was the case status percentages, which was a list of just, essentially, I had broken down all the types of crime and whether or not the suspect got identified and if the suspect was taken to court. So essentially a percentage of the breakdown of all the crimes that end up in any police force. What was the percentage of them that end up in court and taken to court for, I guess, the establishment of verdict, or just get left away? So you could also explore, I guess, and click in different police forces, and you would bring up the individual one. And this one, I don't know why that shifted out of place, but that was a bit lower. But essentially the idea here was, if you looked at it in a bit more depth, and you looked at all the cases that got taken to court, what was the outcome in the court? So whether or not the case was penalized and somebody was criminally convicted, or whether or not the case was dismissed. And the idea here was that there are very little amount of cases that do end up in court, and of those cases that end up in court, there are actually a very little amount that do get convicted. But I wanted to see which police force was actually better at convicting the crimes and the suspect that they had identified.
Why are the colors different between the pie and the other things?
Because this is essentially the total number of, so these colors relate to the previous charts. So the previous chart, essentially, it's just a further down. So it's the same colors here. So you don't see the light blue because I'm taking it out. It was under investigation still. Okay. But this was just...
So that's missing on there.
So it's missing on there. But I had taken it out because I thought it took away from the interpretation of the percentages. So essentially this was the breakdown, and so trying to go into detail, and here you could, on this thing, which I can't select anymore because it's shifted out of the way, but you could select different police forces and try to compare and contrast. So then thereafter I had just kind of gone over specific aspects and specific interesting bits, which I'll go over a bit later, and then I had concluded, but there was a lot of text, it was quite confusing, I guess maybe not as clear and outright as I would have liked it to be, so I decided to go over it again and give it another go. So, here, I decided to clean it up a bit. Essentially, here on the top axis, we got the number of crimes per month aggregated, and here we got just a calendar. So we've been taught how to make a nice calendar, nice, neat looking calendar. So the same highlight actions should be available that you can start looking in the different years.
It's much nicer.
And when you press on it, you should get you get for that year specifically the different types of.
Okay. Yeah.
So I used the LOD expressions to be able to make sure that that stayed constant across time. And so now you get a bit neater idea, and you get the average on top of the number of bicycle thefts. You get also the average and the percentage difference in crime for that month as well across time. So that way you can see that August, while it's still much higher than any other months, has a blue color, so it loses crimes in bicycle compared to the month prior to it, whereas all the months prior to this one, leading up to and after August, still all seems to show an increasing trend.
Because everybody goes on holiday in August.
Everybody goes on holiday in August, which means that you probably have a fair few people who wouldn't put their bikes out and wouldn't get it stolen. Yeah. Then here I selected preemptively a bit, but you can extend. And so I had used, I selected these just to kind of point them out. But essentially, it was the point I wanted to make is that it seems like larger police forces tend to take to court a much smaller percentage of cases than smaller police forces. So if you can see on the right, I added number of incidents to give a bit more context to what does the difference in number of incidents received by any police force. So the smaller police forces tend to identify more suspects and bring them to court, whereas the large police forces.
So these are like the three smallest and the three largest.
Pretty much.
Okay.
But if we take out the filter, and he helped me with this, but essentially it's just organized by the amount of the percentages. And you can see that there's sort of an inverse correlation between the amounts of crime and the percentage of
feels like
taken
it, yeah.
together. It feels like it, at least. And so here, again, taking out the same little pie chart, but this one this time it was highlighted, so at least it made it stand out. I was looking specifically at when the cases get to court, and I did the same logic onto this chart to try to get an idea of which police forces are actually very good at convicting the people that they have taken and brought to court, as opposed to which police forces are actually terrible at it. So here we get an idea that there's less of a pattern in terms of the number of cases. So I had adapted and used LOD expressions to be able to get the actual number of per police force of crimes that do get taken to court. So this is the numbers, like for instance, with Metropolitan London, that's in total 1,434 cases. And of those, 65% of them were penalized versus 35.5 not taken into account. So in my analysis and outlier page, I just look at essentially, I don't know why that one, everything got moved again for some reason. But essentially the idea is that the larger police forces tend to be more successful at penalizing people, and I guess people that they've managed to bring to court and identify, suspects that they managed to identify. But there's a few notable exceptions that you can go for Northumbria, Durham, and Hertfordshire, which have little arrests, but have extremely high conviction rates, so they're doing something quite good somehow. Whereas the populous areas identify little suspects overall, but penalize somewhat less than these top three. On average, there's correlation between the number of percentage, the lower the percentage of the people, the higher percentage of crime that ends up in that police force, the lower the percentage of suspects are actually identified, but the higher the percentage of people who get penalized in those places. So it means that larger police forces, I guess, concentrate on less cases, but end up just essentially focusing more effort on the small number of cases that they do take, and they have more evidence to be able to convict and criminalize and put under conviction certain people. Some of the worst conviction rates come from some of the smallest policing authorities as well, and that's an interesting, I guess, contrast in that sense. And I think that's probably due to inexperience in the policing authorities. Now, two interesting, I guess, small bits is that the British Transport Police used to handle a lot of crime, and all of a sudden it really, really dropped significantly. About 4,000 of the crime that they used to handle got completely non-existent in 2016 and 2014 and 17, which would lead me to believe that there's been some sort of kind of a devolution of just what the British Transport Police are allowed to do with crime, and probably just delegated at a local level when it comes to bicycle theft. And more interestingly, maybe, the police service of Northern Ireland, even though over the span of the 36 months that we were looking at the data, got handed about 2,600 bicycle theft cases, they never identified a single suspect, which is the worst rate in any other place.
It could get worse.
So it couldn't get absolutely worse. It's actually 0% suspect identification rate. So I think they should go over the methods and possibly ask other police forces how to handle and identify bicycle theft crime. So just to kind of follow, I guess, a bit of on Andy's tips, try to add a bit more oomph to some of the bigger numbers, try to draw some attention on, I guess, the larger metrics of what I just said and talked about. Yeah, there you go.
So go back so let's start at the beginning. So, that's fine. Okay, that's your sheet. This one's good. Okay, so I really like this one. You probably could have just ended there. If you go to the next one, who identifies the thief. So, I like how these next two kind of go together. Okay, so this one's fine. So skip to the next one. The thing that confuses me about the next one is you're using blue to mean two different things. So I probably would have chosen a different color for the cases dismissed.
Yeah,
because that could be confusing.
I used the same color scheme as the previous one, but in retrospect, it's possibly a better idea to just, for both cases, use a different color scheme for intensity of crime.
I think from here you could have gone straight to your conclusion and just scrapped that analysis and outliers.
Okay.
Because you can see the same thing in these. You're kind of pulling out bits and sticking it on another chart just to re-emphasize it again. So
possibly just formatting from university, like PowerPoint usage of trying to draw out the specific interesting aspects and identifying them individually.
But I do like how you highlighted the pie chart here, so at least you know now that's specifically what you're looking at. So that's better. Yeah. Cool. Any other feedback? Sorry.
I think, just remember that people are not going to spend time clicking through every single tab, be it on Tableau Public or on your business dashboards. We'll do some analysis on the JLL dashboards that we made, and some of the ones we didn't make. We used. And there's a big one called the FM Daily dashboard, which has like 5 tabs. And looking at the viewing stats on it, people look at 1 or 2 tabs and then they leave. So you really want to boil down and get to the key information so that people get to the information you want to extract quickly.
So are you a proponent of taking story points and doing maybe like David did and making it long instead of a series of tabs?
I don't mind the story points, but just not too many. I'd say 4 or 5 tops, generally.
Okay.
But you're not far off, to be honest.
Yeah.
Be mindful that people will often only click once or twice. That's it.
Yeah. Cool. Well done. Good job. All right. That's it. So thank you for joining online. Okay, Eva said, well done. Only caught the last 3 presentations. Many people don't manage to put out stuff like this after months or even years of Tableau, let alone 4 days of training. Thank you, Eva. And that's it. Have a good day. Bye.